A wife who hires a hitman to kill her husband, a basketball star who has everything taken away from him before he can hit the NBA, and a woman who shot and killed 4 people to try and get her daughter back. Hello, I'm your host, JODY. We have all of this on today's most amazing top 10 list. And guys, make sure you check out our new channel, Top 10 Central Vibe, which is starring me. Just like blup, blup, blup. Oh, and that was for sure poo. This is gonna be Top 10 Central Vibe. Hope you guys like it. It's gonna be starring me all the time. We're in the Illuminati. Coming in at number 10, we have taking out the competition. When people get into legal battles with one another, it can cause them to do some pretty crazy things. Like when Diana Lovejoy tried to kill her husband by hiring her gun instructor to shoot the man. Let's backtrack a little bit so you guys can get the full story. Diana was recently divorced from her husband, and the two of them were going back and forth over who should have custody of their child. Nobody wanted to agree on this, and this led to high tensions between the two. Diana was a gun enthusiast, and I guess she vented about her husband to her gun instructor one too many times, and this led to the two of them coming up with a scheme to kill him so she could make off with her kid. Well, it turns out that her gun instructor was actually a pretty bad shot, and he ended up shooting Mrs. Lovejoy's ex-husband in the armpit, and this dude survived the assassination attempt. In the courtroom, when she hears the verdict, this is what happens.
Diana has suddenly passed out. Her body slumped back in her chair as family members cry and scream in horror.
Yeah, she was not okay with finding out that she was getting life in prison. She faints in the courtroom and they had to rush her to the emergency room. It's too bad for her because that didn't change anything to do with her sentencing, and once she was up and walking around again, she was taken right off to prison. Coming in at number 9, we have several counts. People will commit heinous acts, and then when they are faced with the consequences of their crimes, they break down. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? The clip I'm about to show you is from a man from Michigan, as he was told he was going to receive life in prison.
While in court.
The details of the case. You really just want to talk with your attorney?
The man accused of abusing a 4-year-old boy, a boy who died, broke down as he was charged with murder.
Now, it should be no surprise that he was receiving life in prison, as you heard the crimes in that clip. But realistically, this man had a laundry list of charges, and this was just the first time he was ever charged federally. In fact, if you really want to dig deep, you can find his juvenile record that shows he was committing crimes before he was even a teenager. So when you look at everything that he's done, you realize that he has been subjected to a life of crime before he could ever make decisions for himself. And that's what led to this point, but at the same time, you can't forgive him for committing such horrible crimes. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. Coming in at number 8, we have It Takes Two. Sometimes people team up and commit horrible crimes, and sometimes their families get in on the freakouts. We have all of this together in this massive courtroom freakout. The two women are so shocked by their sentencing that they faint on the spot when they're convicted for murder, and both of them are given life in prison. I can't get into the details of their crime because they are way too gruesome for this channel, but just know that it seems that the judge made the right call on this one. And the screaming that you hear in this clip isn't even from the people who got sentenced. It's actually from their family members who are faced with the fact that the people that they love are going to be locked away for a very long time. Coming in at number 7, we have Got Pepper Sprayed. This was from a case back in 2013. Sandale Jackson was in court because he was accused of killing Nathan Potter. Once he was given his sentence, he reacted like this. This was a wild case because it wasn't so much that Sandale was accused of murder that really drove the tensions high. The case was proceeding as normal, but Sandale started mocking the victim's family. When they were addressed, he smirked at them like the whole thing was a joke. Now, if you didn't commit this crime, you think you would have some sympathy for the people who had their family member murdered. And if you did commit this crime, you think you would try and act innocent and mournful for the victims of the family and try not to antagonize them. You're in handcuffs and people think you killed their son. This isn't the time to start being rude. After Sandale was sentenced, he started to get aggressive with the bailiff, and he actually got pepper sprayed so they could subdue him. Coming in at number 6, we have Stone Faced and Then a Laugh. This one wasn't so much the convict freaking out, but it was the reaction that caused everyone around them to feel uneasy.
But Lindsay actually grinned when the judge read his ruling, the lack of remorse not lost on David Crawford's daughter.
That was the reaction from Nicholas Lindsay when he got sentenced to life in prison for the second time. This was a wild case because Lindsay was sentenced to life in prison after he was convicted for shooting a police officer and killing him. But the thing is that Lindsay was younger than 18, so they shouldn't have tried him as an adult. So his case was reopened, but even the second time he was found guilty. And he didn't even flinch. He actually laughed at the guilty verdict. Maybe because he already knew that this was coming because it had happened to him once before, but you think that he would have been hoping that the second time around he would have been let off the hook or given a lesser sentence, but he straight up didn't care and was ready to take on whatever the prison system threw at him. Coming in at number 5, we have Tony Farmer. Tony Farmer is one of the most famous of these courtroom breakouts. I think many of you out there have seen the bruh meme. Well, that is Tony's face. Now, this reaction that I'm about to show you isn't where the meme comes from, but it's from the time when he got sentenced to be sent to prison at only 19 years old.
On that count as well.
This is an extremely sad case because Tony was set to make it to the NBA. He was a star in his family and everyone thought that one day he would be playing alongside players like LeBron James. But eventually he got into drugs and started robbing people to supply his habit. Really, it's the instability around him that changed the course from NBA hopeful to prisoner. On the bright side, Tony Farmer was released from prison and went back to chase his dream of being a basketball star. He got accepted into a college and quickly rose to be one of the best players at the school, and he started playing with some semi-pro leagues. Coming in at number 4, we have Anthony Barbeau. Anthony Barbeau killed his own grandmother with the help of his friend, and during his sentencing he had this breakdown.
I took away someone's mother, their grandma, sister.
This was a wild case, and even Anthony's mother asked for a more lenient sentencing. He was sentenced to life in prison and he was only 14 years old. There wouldn't be an opportunity for parole until he was 50. His mother didn't want to lose her son and her mother at the same time, but the judge saw him guilty of his crimes. Anthony had suffered a head injury while he was a child, and some think this could have caused him to commit such a horrible crime. But even with a possible medical defense, the judge saw it best to sentence this 14-year-old boy to life in prison. Coming in at number 3, we have Jeremy Christian. Jeremy Christian had a wild outburst during his sentencing that forced police to remove him from the courtroom.
We don't want you here. All your race baiting bull. You ain't gonna be mayor either. You ain't gonna be mayor either.
This was a very disturbing case. Back in 2017, Jeremy Christian approached several people on a train in Portland and tried to kill all of them. In the end, he killed 2 men and injured 1 other. Eventually, the police arrived and subdued him, but it was already too late. Life had already been lost. At his hearing, the victims were speaking out about his terrible acts, and he started yelling at them and telling them that he should have killed them too. For most of his sentencing, he had to be removed from the courtroom, and they played a video feed for him so he could see the victims' testimonies. After everything was said and done, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years in prison. Shout out to the victims of this horrible crime for being brave enough to get in front of this man and give their testimonies, even though he had done something horrible to them. Coming in at number 2, we have Jody Herring. This case is insane to read about. Jody Herring was having her kids taken away from her after a divorce. She had been seen as unfit to raise them, and the state was going to take custody of her children. She desperately didn't want this to happen, but there was nothing she could do to stop this. This led to her going into a rage and tracking down the social worker who facilitated the removal of her children. When she finally found the woman's house, she walked in and shot her. 3 of the social worker's family members were also in the house, and she shot and killed them as well. This ended with her being arrested quickly, and the case was opened in court not long after that. During her sentencing, she pleaded guilty, but when the judge was reading out her sentence, she had this outburst.
I asked for help several times, and I didn't get it.
Prosecutors called the murders methodical. Both families called on the court to send a message in its sentence.
She was trying to plead her case to the family who had just lost everything. She was given the maximum sentence of life without parole, and the family of the victims all spoke about how they will think of their loved ones every birthday that they are not around. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Chris McNabb. This next one is one of the most famous sentencing moments I have ever seen. It went viral, and everyone remembers the face of Chris McNabb.
The records show that I don't think I ever put my hands on her in front of those kids, and I just don't feel like just because somebody has domestic issues.
McNabb was convicted of murder, and in the clip I just showed you, who's trying to defend himself by saying that just because he hits his wife doesn't mean that he killed someone. Now, that is true, but the worst defense that I have ever heard in my life. He's saying I'm a horrible monster, but I wouldn't go as far to be that kind of horrible monster. He goes on a rant for quite some time while he's being sentenced, and the judge eventually doesn't want to hear any more from him, so we then get this moment that blew up all over the internet.
You claim you're innocent, so you tell me what sentence the man or woman that you claim did this should receive.
So the judge was just throwing a little tricky one at him, asking him what sentencing he would give to the so-called mystery person who committed his murder, and we get this to finish it off.
If you ever find out who did them, they deserve to be under the jail.
Okay, so they ought to get the maximum sentence.
Most definitely.
Okay. On the crime of malice murder, I sentence you to life in confinement without parole.
I don't think we have the copyright to the Curb Your Enthusiasm music, but I think you can all picture it in your head while this guy is being sentenced. Alright guys, I've been your host Jay Durena. That's all we have for you today, and keep enjoying this scary content. Bye.